Hello and welcome to my another demonstration on Microsoft Azure Site Recovery. Many of you are familiar with Azure Site Recovery. This is a game changer in the area of disaster recovery. Microsoft has introduced Azure Site Recovery quite some time back, and it's gaining popularity every day. Most of the customers are interested in disaster recovery solution, and Azure Site Recovery perhaps fits the best in that scenario. Many of my customers are approaching us about Azure Site Recovery for their disaster recovery. And as all of us know, disaster recovery is quite a complex process and complex architecture. It depends on a lot of variables and a lot of dependencies and a lot of moving parts. But ASR does a real good job around that. And every customer, every type, every size is interested and is looking for a true, robust, scalable disaster recovery solution. And in my viewpoint, as I mentioned earlier, Azure Site Recovery does a phenomenal job there. Not only it helps customers with their disaster recovery scenarios and RPOs and RTOs, but also Azure Site Recovery has been used successfully for the migration purposes. When you need to migrate certain workloads from your data center to Azure, Azure Site Recovery could be extremely helpful and useful in that scenario too. So many customers are also leveraging Azure Site Recovery, just not for the purpose of disaster recovery, but also for the migration purposes. Many of you know me already. You might have seen my other videos in past. If not, I just want to introduce myself. My name is Atul Raizada. I work for a US Microsoft partner called Logicalis. We have got several offices in the United States. I'm based off Michigan, Detroit. This is one of my hobby to present these technical videos for our technical folks and community and get their feedback and do some kind of a service to the community. So that's where I am. With that, let's just see what the agenda looks like, and maybe it would make sense to you guys, and then we'll go to the actual demonstration. So what we are going to cover here, as I mentioned earlier, the disaster recovery and Azure migration through Azure Site Recovery. ASR is the acronym that we use in general. And the scenario that we are going to try to cover today would be the following. So it might be a long demonstration, but I think it would, I'll try to cover as much as possible in this demonstration. So the first option that we have is for those customers who are running the Hyper-V servers, or they have the physical servers or physical machines, and they want to take the advantage of Azure Site Recovery. They do not have any System Center Virtual Machine Manager or any of that product, and just plain simple Hyper-V environment. And many customers would fall into this category because you might not see often the System Center Service Virtual Machine Manager. And I think I have a typo here. This should be the second bullet, should be System Center Virtual Machine Manager. So for those customers who are not running System Center Virtual Machine Manager, the first option is an excellent option to protect and provide the disaster recovery for the workloads that are running on the Hyper-V servers. The second option is for those customers who are running the System Center Virtual Machine Manager. And in that scenario, we can take the advantage of System Center Virtual Machine Manager in addition to Azure Site Recovery to provide the disaster recovery and the migration services to Azure. The third option would be for Azure Site Recovery for the VMware workloads through the Azure Site Recovery Configuration Manager. This is a large chunk of customers that would fall into this category, where they are running their data center on VMware virtualization platform. And this service would fit into that environment and would help those customers to take the advantage of Azure Site Recovery with very minimal efforts here, right? So that's the advantage of that. And then we would also look into the Azure Site Recovery test failover scenarios. We will look into the planned failovers as well as the Azure Site Recovery production failover. So that's the agenda that I am planning to present in this video. Again, apologies for the typo in the second bullet point. It should be System Center Virtual Machine Manager, not the System Center Service Manager. I might fix it later, but for now, we'll go with this. With that, we'll jump right away into the first scenario of configuring the Azure Site Recovery for the Hyper-V environment without the System Center Virtual Machine Manager. So I'm going to pause and I'm going to get into my lab. So folks, here's my Hyper-V server. This is in one of my Westchester lab, that's the Hyper-V server that we're going to use for this Azure Site Recovery services. I'm not going to install the updates for the time being, and let's just go into the Hyper-V console. And here is I have got a test machine that is running. I also running here the Azure Stack. Sometime I would demonstrate to you the Azure Stack as well. This is an interesting scenario just as a reference. This is Azure Stack is running into a Windows 2016 VM, and it is a nested VM. Basically on the VM we are nesting another VM for Azure Stack. So that's pretty interesting to watch this Azure Stack demonstration sometime. But let's not go there. Let's just focus on our lab here. This is the lab in Westchester that I have here, and then I am also logged on to my Azure admin portal here, right? So that's where we are. So the first step in order to configure the Azure Site Recovery is to create a recovery vault, right? And I already have it here, the recovery services vault, but just to show you the process, right? So if you need to do it in your lab from the scratch, you need to definitely have your rights on the Azure, and then you need to have a storage account that you would use here. And if you need to, I have got many of them. I can just show you for demonstration purposes. I click add. I can name it a demo ASR for the time being. My subscription, I got multiple subscriptions, so it gives you the option of subscriptions here. And then I can create a resource group, or I can use an existing resource group. So for an example, I've got multiple resource groups here, ARM. So let's use this one here, and the location is here, right? And then you just say create, and that's gonna create your recovery vault. Obviously it's gonna use the storage account in the background with the associated with your ARM, right? So that's the process to create the resource group. With that, let's just jump into my demonstration here. And the one that we are going to use, the recovery vault here, is the LGL ASR. And you will find it's pretty intuitive and self-explanatory. So before I go there, I just want to make sure that when you look into the site recovery infrastructure, we have got, in terms of the replicated items, you will see these are the two VMs being replicated. We'll come back here. This is through the System Center Virtual Machine Manager. And same as the backup infrastructure that we will talk in our next demonstration, right? And now we need to go into and look into the ASR recovery policies first. So I'm just going to go there. So if you see here the replication policies, this is where you would actually configure your different replication policies for the ASR. And for an example, I have got few of them already created here. We can just look at one of them to make sure that you understand that. And if you see here, the RPO is 180 minutes and the recovery points are 24 hours. And depending on how you want to do that, this would need storage. This has an impact on the storage, and this has an impact on the recovery points, right? So recovery point threshold, I have kept it 3 hours in this scenario, and I'm going to keep the recovery points in the storage for 24 hours, right? App consistency snapshot is being done every 60 minutes. This is an important configuration because that would define your eventually your SLAs and what kind of RPOs you have, how many recovery points you have, how many recovery points you keep into the storage, and what is the time that the snapshots are being taken by the ASR on your different VMs, right? So this is the first thing. Now, once we understood that, and as I mentioned that we'll go first to configure our ASR for an Hyper-V machine, let's try to do that. We are right here, and if you see here, it's getting started, site recovery, pretty intuitive, guys, here. I don't think that it could be made any simpler here. In my viewpoint, Microsoft has done a good job, and it walks you through the entire process, right? So again, you click the prepare infrastructure, protection goals, right? Now, this is also interesting, folks, that you can do the workloads from on-premises to Azure, and there is a new that is in the preview. So if you have VMs in Azure, you can do between the Azure data centers too, right? So this is Azure preview. We'll talk about sometime later because this demo is already going to be long. So we are doing on-premises Hyper-V server to Azure, right? Very simple. And now you have the options here, right? So yes, with Hyper-V, this is the option that we are going to test first. And then the second option that you get, or sub option that you get here, is do you want to use System Center Virtual Machine Manager? If you look back into my slide deck, that's exactly what I was mentioning. And in this scenario, we are not using System Center Virtual Machine Manager. So the no is right. Then I go to the second option, then we will choose yes. Right, this is straightforward. Click OK here. And now this is very important. I strongly recommend to download this tool that Microsoft has provided to go and run it in your environment. That would give you all the necessary planning, structure estimating, network bandwidth, storage that you would need for ASR. So I strongly recommend that to be downloaded and run in your environment before you start working on ASR, right? So now, in order to go further, I would have to choose, yes, I have done it. That means my button is now enabled here. Click OK. And now it will ask me to create a Hyper-V site, right? I don't have a Hyper-V site. So I create a Hyper-V site here. And I would create it as a name here at Westchester, right? That's where my Hyper-V server is. And that's where it's creating the Hyper-V site right now. And once it is completed, we'll keep going to this fourth and fifth step. It might take few minutes, so I'm going to pause and come back once we are ready. So the site is now created, and now it takes you to the step number 2, because the 0 Hyper-V servers are found. So we need to go to the next step, and the next step is to add a Hyper-V server, right? We have the Hyper-V site. Now we say the Hyper-V server, and here you go, right? So adding Hyper-V server may take 15 to 30 minutes. Register your Hyper-V host on premises. Make sure the host is running Windows Server 2012 R2. This is very important, folks, to make sure that your Hyper-V is following this minimum prerequisites, right? You can download the installer from Azure Site Recovery, and then you can start working on deploying adding this Hyper-V server to the mix. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go from here to the Hyper-V server and download it right there, right? So this is the download vault key, download the vault registration key to register the host, right? So we're going to download the key, we're going to download the product, and then we're going to be good to go and add this Hyper-V server. So let's just go here, and I'm going to launch. I should have launched right here the portal. So I'm on my Hyper-V server. I'm going to download the key here, registration key, and I'm going to save it here. Saturday, March 17, 2018. I saved it here, and I'm going to download the installer here for the Azure Site Recovery Provider. And I'm going to save it. I already have downloaded here, so but I can probably download the latest version because they just updated some few things here. So I'm going to download it here in the desktop. And download is completed. Okay. Okay, so use Microsoft Update, very conventional. Click next. It's going to ask for that key file that we downloaded earlier. I think I downloaded here in ASR. Browse for the folder. Okay. And want to recovery provider, the setup will install it. Specify where you want to install Azure Site Recovery Provider. The setup will install Azure Site Recovery. I think I should do it basically here in program files here. And install. I'm going to pause, and once it is done, I'm going to come back. So installation is now completed. It took about 2 or 3 minutes, so not a big deal, right? And now we register here, and it will ask me for the key as expected. And we download it here in ASR folder, and date modified. This should be the one, I guess. March 17, 2018. Automatically picks up everything here. Next. Connect directly to the Azure. I don't have a proxy server, so this is all very self-intuitive. So I'm going to pause again here, and just to make sure that video gets not too long here. And as soon as, and folks, this is done. So it's completed. It took about less than 3 or 4 minutes in addition to installation. So I'm going to go and finish and see, go back to our console here, and yep, I have got my server. You see here, folks. Click OK. Right, now the storage account that I talked about, subscription, the deployment model is resource manager, storage account, found 7, right? So we need to make sure found 7 is standard compatible as out of 16 available in the subscription, and networks here too, right? Ensure that at least, and it has already verified, so we're good to go. You can go here and add a storage account, or you can add your networks if you want to. One of the prerequisites in terms of preparing for ASR is to make sure that that's obvious that you have configured your network connectivity between your data center and Azure. Basically, in my environment, I have a site-to-site VPN configured, so that, and then the networks that you have configured proper DNS. So once you fail machine over, it knows where to talk and how to talk about. So all that prerequisite has already been done, and I click OK here. And now the replication policy that we talked about, right? So we have got LGL ASR and LGL Hyper-V. I will use the LGL Hyper-V here. And no associated replication policy. Let's see if it lets me do that now. So we can say associate here. Okay, so we have to go back or create or an associate, because my policy has an encryption setting to Hyper-V site. Let's just go here and create an associate. That would be a good example. So let's call it Westchester underscore HPV. Source type Hyper-V. Copy frequency 5 minutes is fine. the recovery point retention in hours, I'm just gonna make sure this is demo environment, that this is RPO, that 1 hour is good for me. I don't want to do it multiple times. App consistent snapshot, which we discussed earlier, is 1 hour. Starting application. Okay. Creating replication policies may take a couple of minutes. We'll come back. So here you go, folks. So I was finally able to associate the replication policies with the Hyper-V sites, and we're good to go. Okay. And that's all we need to do about the Hyper-V service here. I'm sorry, just had to go back. Okay. Now we can go to the replicated items because we already have the server ready, and we can try to add and replicate a new machine here. On premises, source location Westchester, right? And we have all this information: subscription, our resource group, the resource manager, the storage account that I'm using here, and we can use the network here. As I mentioned, that the network should be configured. So I have got these networks already, and I'm using the one that I want. LGL domain services default is this. This has already been configured with the DNS. Click OK. And here's my machine. That is the machine that we are gonna protect now, this guy. Okay. Okay. And OS type, Windows. Need to select per VM, OS disk, 127 gig. Click OK, and hopefully this should just start working. Okay. Enable replication. And here you go. And that's all, folks, in order to configure your Hyper-V servers for ASR. As I demonstrated in this this video so far, it took us about 20 minutes or less to come back finally with this replication status, right? The why it is showing healthy right now, because I was playing it before and I was getting ready for this demonstration. So we have done this, I had done this work earlier, and now we are ready with this this server here, right? So all good here so far. And as you see here, this is very straightforward. This is simple. And now if you are okay, then we can move into the second scenario where we could use a System Center Virtual Machine Manager. I'm just going to walk you through. I have already configured and deployed it. These two machines that you see here are running from my System Center Virtual Machine Manager, and you see the server name here. That's my SCVMM server, and we can go and look at that as well as I speak to you. All right, so while this is working here, 0% synchronized, started working it, and I hope in a few minutes, in an hour or so, it would be fully protected. All right, so the next layer is to go back and now start looking into the second scenario where we could use System Center Virtual Machine Manager. So I'm gonna close this terminal server session or RDP session with this Westchester machine, and I'm gonna go into my lab, which sits into my basement here in Detroit, and we'll go from there. All right, so this is the server This is my System Center Virtual Machine Manager. And just to show you, this is the System Center Virtual Machine Manager AZ LGL Win12 AZ.local, and I'm going to close it here, and hopefully that's my System Center Virtual Machine Manager. You create a cloud, configure it, takes few minutes to do that. You already have an Azure subscription here, add it into the System Center Virtual Machine Manager, and as I said, chances of running in this scenario is relatively low, maybe 10% or 15%, but you just need to be familiar with this process, right? So I've got multiple VMs here. You will see here, these are all the VMs that I'm running here, but in the cloud, I only have these two, which we are replicating right now, right? And that's pretty much it. So now when we go back into the Azure portal, we're going to go back to our recovery vault. And we're going to do the same thing that we did here, right? So getting started, site recovery, and this time our scenario would be slightly different, right? So protection goal from on-premises to Azure, again with Hyper-V. This time we are using System Center Virtual Machine Manager. So remember earlier when we did that for Hyper-V, we have chosen the option no. This time the option is yes. And again, the same window that you have seen in the last demonstration, for demonstration on Hyper-V. Now if you see here, I have already configured that. If you have more, then you can just click plus VMM and you can add your VM server, download the Azure Site Recovery Agent, install the same thing like we did it earlier on the Hyper-V server. You get the key, you get the installation, and then you are good to go, right? So this is already done. Yes, I have installed the agent. Right, so this is the agent is already installed on my machine, and then it also gives you the good documentation around it. It's already good to go, and we have associated a replication policy, right? So pretty much straightforward stuff here. Now once you go back here into, let me close it, or okay, go back to the machine here. These two servers are being replicated. So if I go to the properties of this, right, so this is Windows Server 2012 R2 Datacenter, hardware configuration. So this is an Hyper-V server. That's why, because System Center Virtual Machine Manager can also manage ESX and Zen server, but in this scenario we have got only the Hyper-V server. So remember that you could also use it if you are using System Center Virtual Machine Manager, and if you have the VMware data center or using Citrix Xanax servers for your virtualization platform, this solution would work in that scenario as well, right? So that means we can take care of VMware, Hyper-V, as well as XenApp through one system center virtual machine manager, right? So this is a plain simple configuration here. Why it's not doing that? Giving me a good option here. and it has the endpoints, right? So because it is replicating in a real time. Let's try to do something different here. Let me show you in the Hyper-V console that MFA server replication is enabled MFA here, and if you go to the replication here, perfectly normal, ready, it can be failed over, right? So it has replicated successfully. Same is the case with this second machine, which you will see here, application, your application status, all good here, good to go. And these machines are ready to be test failover or planned failovers or the production failovers into Azure, right? Now, let's try to do something different now. And first thing that we should do is we need to add one more machine in production, right? So I'm going to go here and say, for an example, let's pick up one of the machine here. This is too big a machine. I don't want to touch this. Let's see here. And I can move it into the cloud. That's the point I'm trying to do, right? So just bear with me 1 second. So folks, if you see here, AZ-admin_W10, that's a Windows 10 machine. And it is, if you go to the properties, it is not yet protected, right? So it says here cloud is not associated to the cloud. So if you go back here, you will not see this machine here, right? So let's try to do this first. And if we go back here into this machine, we say AZ-Win10, you get the properties, and we just go here and select it. And now this machine is moved into the cloud protection and it's ready to be protected, right? So if I go here, I see this machine, I can power on, and I can go to the properties. Come on. Let's just get that machine restarted and then we will try to put a protection again. So we can go to the properties of this machine, Syn Cloud, 64 edition of Windows 10, generation 1, status good, hardware configuration. We need to make sure that this is Hyper-V, right? And I'm just baffled at why my graphics are not good. Processor 1, memory good, floppy drive I don't need to worry about. IDE device, this is my VHDX, the machine here, and network connected to this network. And if I go to here you go. So I can enable Microsoft Azure Site Recovery protection for this virtual machine, and I'll use replication frequency 5 minutes, right? That's all I need to want to do that. And hopefully once this is completed, this should start working. Okay, so once we have done that, enable that protection on those two machines. Actually, I did it to two machines. If you go back here, this was AZ-Zia. If you go to properties, manage replication, I have enabled replication on this guy. So let's go back and add it into our replicated machines here in the portal and see whether that starts working. So we're going to go to the replications and replicated items. Yeah, we have some challenge here on this one. We'll look into what the problem is, but let's try to say replicate on premises. We are picking up the System Center Virtual Machine Manager, and storage account is fine. And I can see here now this machine, turn the replication on. Yep. It was not following the Azure naming convention. Replication policy. And it's turning the replication on this machine that is being controlled by System Center Virtual Machine Manager here, right? So if I refresh it here, AZGI is healthy. All right, folks, so we're going to start with our third scenario where we would be doing the disaster recovery for a data center using the VMware vSphere vCenter virtualization platform. And before we get into that, it's important that we look into the prerequisites here. And this particular Microsoft article document is pretty intuitive. So we can start from here. That the CPU requirement, the RAM requirement, the number of disks, and this document is actually a pretty good document to follow when you're actually deploying it. Now make sure that when you start deploying that, you meet this requirement. Actually, when you start importing this OVF template, at that time it wouldn't even not let you change this configuration. So make sure that you have the required resources available in your VMware infrastructure before you start doing that, right? So extremely important. And if you try to change the setting, actually when you start deploying the template, the RAM is 16 gig at that time, right? And if you try to reduce the RAM or change the disk space, it's not going to let you even do that. So make sure that you take care of it. And if you are really short of space or whatever, you could probably try to do the thin provisioning. I tried it in two different scenarios because I have real networking challenges in my lab environment. But I will try to do that. I'm almost sure that I may not be able to actually finally protect a VM because my VMs cannot talk back to the configuration server, but I should be able to do everything else, bring it them and configure the protection on that. It's going to fail on protection because my VMs are not going to be able to talk to the configuration server, right? With that, just make sure that you understand this piece here, and if you follow this document, and very clear, simple, well-written document, it also gives you the capacity planning. You can download the template, and then we'll start from this process right here, right? So let's go back to the portal here. And when you go to the portal, obviously you go to the site recovery infrastructure here, right? And then go do the same thing that we have done in last two scenarios. So you're on premises to Azure. This time we are doing the third scenario, which is yes with VMware vSphere hypervisor, right? Click OK. And then you can go to the same screen that you're familiar now. Click OK. And here you're going to add, so forget about this server. This was my experiment on a Hyper-V server, which generally is not possible. I have not yet removed it. So we're going to go to this option here, and then you need to download this virtual machine template. Now, please make sure that you understand that this is about almost 18 gig of the configuration server template. So it might take some time to download it, so plan accordingly. And then you have to deploy the OVF template wizard. I had two different environments. In the vSphere environment, it was pretty easy and straightforward for me, but that environment didn't work for me because of different networking challenges. So I had to do it in a different vCloud environment. And that was quite a challenge to deploy this OVF template because of the VMware client plugin. I struggled with that with my vCloud, and but finally I was able to make it work. Right, so I have already downloaded this template here, and let me show you the template quickly. So here is the template, right? This is the OVA file which you would be importing in as a template into the VMware environment. And look at the sizes here is about 18 plus 18, almost 19 gigs here, right? So as I mentioned, it might take some time depending on your network speed to download this template, and then you have to upload it back and import it. So I think it's a good 24-hour process to deploy this template in my viewpoint, with depending on your network speed, right? So what I have done so far, I have downloaded it. I have already imported this template into my vCloud here. If you see, this is the machine which is turned on, and then we're going to go from here. All right, so let me connect to this VM, and we're going to follow this wizard here. And simply accept it. It didn't give me the chance to run the password, but hold on. All right, so I'm back here. I was able to log onto the machine. I'm going to name this machine as okay, we're going to sign in here. This is the wizard that automatically comes in. And so pretty straightforward. Select the tenant. And now we're going to reboot it. And before I start configuring that, I need to at least do a few more things to let it connect to my vCenter. So I'm not going to start configuring it right now. Give me a few minutes to make sure that I can make it work. I'll come back. All right, so I have established the network connectivity with my vCenter. Let's see here. We can select a NIC here, and that is correct. The port is correct, right? So we can save it here. Now, sometime if you change the IP address, you need to come back here and change the IP address and save it again. So we're going to continue doing this. Okay, sign in here, obviously. Okay, I'm gonna pick up my subscription here. I've got too many of them. Let's pick up our resource group. And then we're gonna pick up our recovery vault, right? And please note, that's very important. So make sure that everything is good. Looks good to me. I'm gonna continue here. All right, now we need to install the MySQL, and it's gonna take a few minutes to install it. So I'm gonna pause it and let it complete the installation and come back. All right, so the SQL installation is complete. I'm gonna continue here. Looks all good. Complaining about memory. It needs 16 gig. I have 12 gigs, so I'm not gonna change it right now. And I'm gonna continue here. Yes. Now, this is the moment of truth if my network allows me to do that or not, but we'll see in a minute. So I think I should do that first of all. Just gonna make sure that I can connect here first. Perfect. All right, so hopefully perfect. So this is where I was able to add the vCenter here, and I can continue. Now, like I said, I do not want to credentials, and I will manually, or I can try doing that. So I don't think it's going to let me do that, but let me try that. LGLMSFT. I don't think it will let me do that, but there's nothing wrong in trying. And as expected, it failed because that domain doesn't even exist here. So I'm going to leave it the way it is and not worry about it. And finalize configuration. And that should pretty much be it. Once it completes, then we should be able to go back into our Azure portal and complete the remaining tasks. It's going to take a few minutes, so it's better to pause it here and come back to make sure that video is not unnecessarily lengthy. Alright, so we have successfully configured here. Now we can go to the Azure Site Recovery inside the portal. Let's click here, log on to Azure and complete our task there. We're going to continue going to the site recovery started. Same thing with VMware vSphere hypervisor. Same drill. And now I'm going to pick up my new server, which is what we just configured, right? And vCenter, it has already configured it, right? That's awesome. Now the resource manager, the storage account, right? Now we need to make sure that we have the right storage account, and it says it has already verified. It has already verified our network exists, it has verified our storage account exists, so we can safely click OK. And now we need to pick up a replication policy, and I think I can take the vCenter policy. Okay, let's try to do this. Atul ASR is, so we need to associate first. So all done, and now we can click OK, and we are completed here, right? So if you go back, let me just take care of this first, and then we can come back here. Connected, fine. Now let's go back. Now we're going to try to protect a VM running on the vSphere or vCenter, and we'll see that that we can add that. As I promised you that it might not protect it because those VMs cannot talk to this vCenter config server directly. That's our networking challenge. But we should be able to at least add them, right? Replicated items. And if you see the one that we configured earlier, they're all healthy, protected. We can even do the test failover and production planned failover and production failover. But before we go there, let's just try to add a VM from the vCenter. On premises, perfect. Okay. Subscription, failover resource group, resource manager, storage account, it has picked it up. The network, I have to pick it up. So the failover network, and I'm gonna pick this guy. I'm gonna pick my subnet here. As I mentioned earlier, all DNS, all domain controllers are all set up in the Azure. So in case this machine fails over, I have my domain controllers running in Azure as an infrastructure as a service. This particular network or subnet is already configured with the DNS pointing to that particular domain controller or domain controllers. And once it fails it over, this machine can definitely talk to the Active Directory and keep functioning normally the way it functioned on-prem, right? Click OK. And here I have got all my machines showing up, right? All my machines that I'm running on the VMware are showing up here. So for an example, I can pick up this guy just for an example, click OK. And account, machine, this to replicate, click OK. 60 minutes, our RPOs, retention, snapshots. I'm not doing the replication group for this demo. Click OK, enable replication. And that's pretty much, it's gonna fail. We know that because that machine cannot talk to the network, but we can show you that the replication, these VMs could be very easily added. And if the network and everything is good, then they are protected as well, right? Here you go, right? So that's pretty much it as far as the VMware component is concerned. I think it's pretty straightforward, except for a little downtime in downloading the OVA template and then deploying the OVA template to the OVF template import policy. That's a little bit time consuming, but other than that, it's pretty straightforward, right? So that's all about the vSphere or vCenter configuration with the Azure Site Recovery. I hope it makes sense. I hope it makes it easier, and any confusion, any doubts that you have is now clear. Obviously, when you start playing with this more and more, then you get more acquainted, and that's the key, right? Now, let's try to see a particular machine that we can try to fail it over, and let's try to test the failovers here, right? So I have a planned failover, I have a failover, and I have a test failover. So if I try to do a planned failover or a failover, it will tell me that, hey, you have never tried to test failover this, right? So now this machine is, he says here, never performed successfully, right? So let's try to do a test failover and see how does it go. Right, that's my latest RTO, which was 656, and I'm at 708, about 7 minutes back, right? And Azure Virtual Network, and my network here is, click OK. And this is as this is just the planning and testing the failover. And folks, it's pretty straightforward. And all of you guys who are in this business, who have been in an IT, for us, I think this is no brainer. This is extremely easy, extremely simple, and extremely powerful as well in terms of a true disaster recovery solution, right? Takes few minutes to configure it, and then you get a peace of mind that, hey, I have got my data center or my critical VMs being protected, and in case of a disaster I can test failover, so I'm ready. And then in a true disaster scenario, I can fail over these machines into Azure successfully. All right, so it's running right now. Test successful. And I'm going to pause and come back as soon as this is finished. So folks, the test successful test failover is completed now. There is no issues. It has successfully completed the test failover, right? It's healthy. If I go to the task here, then you will see that it has completed successfully. And I can also show you the VM here, right? So all right, let's see whether that machine shows up here now. And I hope that that machine is right here. So we have completed that machine. We have successfully failed over into Azure, and now we can go and do the cleanups, right? So going back into the portal here and going back to the site recovery vault, going back into the and back to replicated items. And as I promised you that this is going to fail because of my networking, that's just happened. And now we can go to the cleanup. So guys, if you look at the top, test failover of the virtual machine has completed. To delete the virtual machines created in test failover, cleanup test failover task, right? Option on the virtual machine. So we'll do that in a second. When I clicked on the machine, here is my cleanup test failover task. You can click it and testing is complete. Delete the test failover virtual machine, which is what I just showed you. And I say successful demo and then I can click OK, and it's going to delete that VM that it created as a test failover. Right now, I think guys, this is all I need to show you, and once this is done, you could do the same thing for planned failover or actual production failover by following the same steps that we just followed for the test failover, right? So I don't think I need to waste your time and going and demonstrating you the same steps again over and over again for planned failovers or test failover or production failover. That's pretty intuitive, but pretty straightforward. I hope that would do this demo for us. Hopefully you will find it useful. Hopefully some of your doubts would be cleared. And if you are planning a true disaster recovery solution for your data center, I personally feel this is a very nice, powerful, robust, scalable solution. The cost wise also, it's pretty effective. You can get it for first 30 days for free. And then once you start replicating or protecting your VMs to Azure, you only pay for the storage initially with a very minimal charge for the Azure site recovery. And once you actually fail over to the to Azure data center, then you actually start paying for the compute cost or the VM cost. But other than that, straightforward. Hope you like it. Thank you again for watching this long video. Appreciate a lot, and I would be creating another video on Azure backups with the configuration manager and backup server and whatnot, and probably also add Veeam backup into the mix, and we'll go around it in our next demonstration. So stay tuned, and thanks again. Bye-bye.